Hi, everybody. I'm Bill Brennan, welcoming you to another edition of Honolulu on the Move, the show that brings you the latest news and information about the Honolulu Rail Transit Project. I'm happy to have with me today as my guest the man who's recently been elected as the chairman of the board of directors of the Honolulu Authority for Rapid Transportation, or HART as we say. His name is Mr. Ivan Louis Kwan. Ivan, thank you so much for joining us today. Appreciate it.
My pleasure, Bill.
You know, HART now is 2 years old, and the board itself is 2 years old, been in place since July of 2011. Where have we been the past 2 years?
Over the past 2 years, we've addressed and pretty much quantified the risks to the project. The risks, as I've seen them, have been political, finance, and legal.
Yes.
Politically, you know, there was a challenge to the project in the last mayor's race.
Yes.
And there were a number of candidates for city council who were opposed to rail. And so the way I see the political reality is that the people have spoken by the election of a mayor who is totally dedicated to the rail project and the vast number of pro-rail candidates for city council. So I see that as a very positive development. The second area that's been a challenge has been finance.
Yes.
And the sources of financing, as we know, come from the federal government, about 30% of the project, which is about $1.55 billion, and the balance from the state GET tax. And with respect to those two sources, we're in, I say, good shape.
Yes.
The fact that the full funding grant agreement has been executed, through which the federal government has committed to providing the full funding for its share of the project, is a huge monumental achievement, thanks to Senator Inouye and our congressional delegation. With the GET tax, the stream of revenue that's come in has been very encouraging in that it's been pretty much on track. And as revenues come in from a source of taxation like that, it can't be thoroughly sterile and uniform, but I think we're very much on track.
Yes.
The other thing about the financing is that when we go to different jurisdictions throughout the United States, what we find is that other projects are very envious of our project. In that they say, how can it be that you have a project that's financed in a way that by 2022, when the project is completed, you'll have no debt.
Right.
And that's a function of how the project was set up financially to be paid for by the federal government and by the GET tax. And as I understand it, the GET tax is contributed to largely by visitors as well. About 30% of the GET tax is paid for by visitors. So the third area of challenge and risk that we've seen over the past 2 years has to do with the legal lawsuits.
Yeah.
And there was a case, there was an appeal by Bombardier, one of the bidders in the project, and so that case has been dismissed. It went from was appealed to the DCCA, up to the Circuit Court and to the Intermediate Court of Appeals, and the Intermediate Court of Appeals dismissed that lawsuit. There was a second lawsuit that was filed which challenged the interpretation of SHPTA, this State Historic Preservation Office, in its interpretation of its rules, which their interpretation was that the project was entitled to do the archaeological inventory surveys in phases. Correct. So there were 4 phases. It was challenged by Paulette Kaliikini, and she said that the interpretation should be that the entire route should be completed by the archaeological inventory surveys and not in phases. The Circuit Court and the Intermediate Court agreed with the state's interpretation, but the Supreme Court agreed with the plaintiff's interpretation. So the result of that was that the construction of the project was stopped, and that was just about a year ago. Yes. August 24, 2012. I remember that day very clearly. Yes. Because there was a big challenge, and so what's happened is that we're a year away from that decision by the Hawaii Supreme Court, which indicated that we have to stop the project, start construction of the project. But thanks to, I think, outstanding leadership on the part of Dan Grabowskis and his just outstanding team of people, together with help from the board of directors. We are now a year away, and I must say that all the correct steps have been taken to address the concerns and mandates really by the Hawaii Supreme Court. The major mandate by the Hawaii Supreme Court was that the entire route be completed in whole with the archaeological inventory surveys. And so what that's taken is HART working very closely with a large number of different organizations and individuals. HART has worked very closely with the SHPTA, State Historic Preservation Office, with the Department of Land and Natural Resources,
Right.
with the Hawaiian community, the cultural and lineal descendants, the burial council members, the plaintiff, Kaliikini, Paulette Kaliikini in the case, has worked very closely with Cultural Surveys, who was the contractor to do all of the archaeological diggings, and has worked very closely also with the contractor who was told, Kiewit, that he needed to stop. And as a result of the delay in the construction, they incurred a certain amount of damages.
Yes.
And so we had to address that. But through the, I think, good working relationship and thoughtful consideration between Kiewit and with HART, you know, that damage amount had been minimized. And so the way I see it is that those three areas, the finance, the political, and the legal, have been addressed and quantified to a large extent. The one outstanding lawsuit we have has to do with the federal litigation.
Yes.
The U.S. District Court Judge Tashima indicated that out of the approximately 57 claims challenging the appropriateness of the environmental impact statement, the judge indicated only 3 needed to be addressed, and that had to do with traditional cultural properties,
Right.
with the Mother Waldron Park and with the Beretania Street tunnel alternative. And so what was required was a supplemental EIS and public comment. And you did a very good job in conducting that public hearing on the supplemental EIS. So that has been submitted to the Federal Transit Administration for determination, and assuming that it's accepted, then it'll go back to the district court.
Right.
The other piece of what's happened with Judge Tashima's opinion is that was appealed by the plaintiffs to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. The hearing was held about a week or so ago, and as I understand, we were having a board meeting at the time that the hearing was going on, so we couldn't view it on the website. But based on the reports from the lawyers and other observers, the Ninth Circuit is considering, there are 3 members on the panel of the Ninth Circuit, and they seem to spend a lot of time questioning whether the opinion of judge and decision of Judge Tashima was ripe and appropriate for consideration at the present time. And I think the questioning had to do with, well, maybe the case should be sent back, dismissed, the appeal should be dismissed and sent back to Judge Tashima to consider everything together with his consideration of the 3 items that he said that HART needed to address.
Yes.
So as I look over the past 2 years, Bill, we've come a long way.
Yes.
And kind of looking forward to a bright new day. Those challenges were pretty daunting, but I think with the hard work, the determination, the thoughtful work of the HART staff, and I must say that the board also worked very hard in supporting the staff. I think we're in a very different place.
Yes. That's an excellent summary, actually, I think, of where we have been the past couple of years. We've overcome a lot of obstacles, have put a lot of priority on the archaeological inventory survey, put priority on being transparent. I know the elections turned out well for us. So you've probably brought us from 2011 to 2013 where we stand today. And it's also the board's role to basically kind of set the policy for the public transit authority that we are. Where do you see us going short, mid, long-term future?
Well, what I see is that we need to continue to be transparent. We need to continue to reach out to the community.
Mm-hmm.
We need to continue to reach out to the people who are paying the bills, who are the taxpayers. We need to continue to work with the policymakers, and the policymakers are the mayor, the city council members, the state legislature, which has funded this project, our congressional delegation, and to enable them to be able to communicate effectively with their constituents when their constituents have concerns or questions
Yes.
about the project. And so we really need to we've already been committed, but we need to make sure that our commitment is continually renewed to be transparent. What's really very interesting to me is that among the policymakers, the major policymakers, now that the full funding grant agreement has passed to Congress, are the two main ones at the moment are the mayor and the city council, and they have been extremely supportive, of the project in a lot of different ways, and so I feel really good about where we are.
Right. One of your jobs early on was to do a search and hire the executive director of the authority and executive director / chief executive officer, and you selected Dan Grabowskis. I know you mentioned him a little bit earlier when talking about the archaeological inventory survey. What was it about Dan that appealed to you, and how do you think he's performed in his role he's been here maybe about a year and a half?
Dan Grabowskis has performed in an outstanding manner. He's just an excellent choice, and one of the major responsibilities of a board is to not just to set policy, but also to select and to evaluate and the executive director, CEO, and so we went through a very thorough process. And
Yes.
Kesley Hui, who was the chairman at that time of the HR committee, did an outstanding job in managing that selection process. But we, I must say that we made a very good decision in selecting Dan Grabowskis, and for a number of different reasons, he's turned out to be a outstanding leader. One, we selected him on the basis of his record and his performance running the rapid transit system in Massachusetts, around the Boston area.
Yes.
So that was very important. But what's turned out to be very, very important and essential in our project is not just technical awareness and sensitivity to the rail issues, but also how do you embrace and advance transparency, and with the people who are paying the bills here, who are the taxpayers and the communities, and also with the policymakers, the city council, the mayor, the congressional delegation, the state legislature. And Dan has done just a super job together with the team of people at heart in being transparent, being forthcoming, being flexible, being sensitive to the concerns not only of the voters but the concerns of the policymakers. And I must say that he's just done an outstanding job.
You mentioned Kesley Hui, a fellow board member of yours who headed up the Human Resources Committee, I believe, at
That's
the
right.
time that Dan was selected, and it was kind of his committee that did the initial work, and of course the full board signed off on the selection of Dan. But Kesley is just one of several other board members, all from kind of diverse backgrounds. Each one brings something to the table. Describe for me how you view the board as a whole, and maybe some of the individual members who make up our board.
That board is comprised of very talented and diverse individuals. One of the things that we're all different.
Yes.
We all have different skill sets. You know, we have a banker, we have lawyers, we have planners, we have business people, we have people who are very familiar with the operations of unions. And so it's a very diverse group of people and very talented group of people.
Yes.
But the one thing, even though we're different and we have different points of view, which I don't think is bad, it gives you a better pool of ideas from which to select, is that the one thing we have in common is that we're totally committed to the success of this project, and making sure this project is built on time and on budget. There are 10 members of the board, 3 under the city charter, 3 are selected by the mayor, 3 are selected by the city council, 3 are ex officio, and they are the Department of Planning and Permitting Director, who is George Atta.
Right.
The second one is the Director of Transportation Services, and that's Mike Formby.
Okay.
And the third ex officio member is the State Director of Transportation, and that's Dr. Glenn Okimoto.
Correct.
And so you've got 3 appointed by the mayor, 3 appointed by the city council, 3 ex officio, and there's a 10th. And under the city charter, the 10th person is selected by the board members, the board members who have the right to vote. The only person who is not a voting member is the Director of Planning and Permitting.
Right.
And so we have committees. We have the HR committee. Kerry Okinaga, who did an excellent job as a chair of the board, is now the chair of the HR committee. We have the governmental affairs, audit, and legal matters committee. I used to be the chair of that,
Yes.
but now Robert Bunda, who used to be the president of the state senate in early part of his life, is running that committee as the chair. We have a transit-oriented development committee, and that is being chaired by William Buzz Hong. Buzz has a very deep and strong relationship with his in union background, but he's also highly respected, by a lot of the policymakers and people in the community. Then we have a project oversight committee, and that is chaired by Damian Kim,
Right.
who's the leader of the Electrical Workers Union,
Right.
and he does a really good job, chairing that committee. We also have the finance committee. Don Horner was the chair of the finance committee. Don Horner is now the vice chair of the board. And so what's happened with the finance committee is Don has taken the position as vice chair, and Kesley Hui, who was the vice chair, has become the chair.
Right, I see.
So you've got a group of people who are, as I said, very talented, very diverse, but one thing in common: totally committed to doing the people's work here and making sure this project is successful and completed on budget and on time.
Yes. I know earlier you mentioned looking forward to the next short-term, mid-term history for HART, that we continue to reach out to people. I know in our public involvement team we're working with folks to bring the design of the stations out into the communities, and seeking the public's input is asking them what they would like to see, what amenities they would like to see with their stations. We also have an art in transit program. I know some of these things go to aesthetics, and one of the criticisms maybe of the project early on was that it's not going to be all that aesthetically pleasing. These are attempts, I think, by the authority to make the project more aesthetically pleasing, and I think the more that people get to see what is involved and how complex it is, and how we're working really quite hard to make this not only an efficient but also a very beautiful transit project for our island is something that we put a high priority on. Can you talk a little bit about what what you've seen? Because I know we've made presentations to the board about those kinds of programs that we're taking out to the people and how you feel about them.
Well, I think you're absolutely right, Bill. Clearly, the project was designed to be efficient in transporting people from where they live to where they work and where they play, they recreate, and also to create a better quality of life for the people so that they can spend more time with their families and their communities by spending less time commuting in their cars. And so you're really talking about function and efficiency, but there's no reason, and so I think a lot of people thoughtfully say, yeah, I see that, but the thing can be improved upon in its appearance. It has an impact visually that we need to mitigate somehow.
Yes.
And I think that's something we've taken to heart. We've really embraced that the concept that yes, we have the funding, yes, we have the technical expertise to put it together, but we really need to listen to the voices that say, let's see what we can do to make this aesthetically pleasing as possible. And so the art program is one of those.
Yes.
Where the HEART team, including you and others, and have gone out to the different communities and talked about how we make the stations, there are 21 stations over that 20-mile track. How can we make those stations reflect the spirit of the people? When I say the spirit of the people, I'm talking about the communities that are in those locations. Talking about our native Hawaiian traditional customs and practices, and maybe in some places where you have a sugarcane community, how do we reflect the values, the practices, the traditions of that community into the station, and not just the station, but maybe the pillars, that support the guideway.
Right.
And so that's one thing we've done, and I think one of the things we've talked about is blending efficiency with beauty. So efficiency, obviously, you need efficiency, and cost savings are realized by making sure that you have as much uniformity as possible in the stations, because you don't want to create a whole new customized design and infrastructure for each station. So you want to have those uniform.
Right.
And so you realize economies of scale in cost with uniformity there, but there's no reason why with the artwork and the exterior facades of these structures, in the stations and on the guideway, why they can't reflect the beauty and the spirit and the soul of our communities.
Yes.
There's no reason why you can't have aesthetics incorporated into function. And so, that's one of the things that HEART is really moving toward, is let's figure out how we keep to our budget, not be excessive in our expenditures, but at the same time reflect the soul, the spirit, the traditions, the customs of the communities where where the people who will be using this train lives.
Right.
And the way I see it is, there's no reason why you can't, you have to compartmentalize, for example, the objects of beauty you see in a museum, or, into a place where you're using all the time. Some people have homes and their environments where they create places that they feel comfortable.
Sure.
They feel inspired.
Yes.
With the art, works of art, and things that remind them of things that are beautiful, and things about their history and their background, their families. So that's the way I see the project.
Yes. I know it's important to you, that particular element of it. Yes?
It is very important. Very, very, very important.
Yes. Well, I'm sorry to say we've run out of time already, and I really enjoyed talking to you, and I'm happy that you came by to be our guest this week, Mr. Ivan Louis Kwan. We try to make it very easy for you to stay in touch with our project, and here's just a few of the ways that you can do that. If you have a question you'd like us to answer on our next Honolulu on the Move show, go ahead and hit us up on Twitter or Facebook, just two of the places where you can stay informed with up-to-date information on the Honolulu Rail Transit Project. And you can view our latest project videos on YouTube or Vimeo. If you'd like more information on the project or would like a presentation to your group or organization, give us a call at our project hotline at 566-2299 or contact us via our website at honolulutransit.org. By the way, we've redesigned our project website. Visitors to honolulutransit.org will find it a more colorful, interactive, and user-friendly site. You'll be able to keep up with the latest news and information about the project, important meeting dates, times, and locations, and examine the official documents that are guiding the project's planning and construction. Take some time to visit the new and improved honolulutransit.org. And don't forget that you can also join us here every Sunday night at 4:30 p.m. on Olelo Channel 54. On behalf of all of us on the project team, mahalo for joining us today, and we'll see you again next time for another edition of Honolulu on the Move.